According to his longtime collaborators, picture editor Jay Rabinowitz, sound editor Bob Hein, and re-recording mixer Tony Volante, when you enter the world of making a film with Jim Jarmusch, you enter a world of subtleties wrapped in layers of wry and personal humor, late-night mix sessions, and a familial atmosphere that fuels your imagination, something conditional to making the music that ultimately is a Jim Jarmusch film.
Beyond the film itself that you're working on, if I were to hang out with Jim and Jay in the cutting room and we shoot the breeze, you learn a lot about everybody's sensibilities.
That's right.
You know, you understand the
bigger picture stuff, and you start to meld how you take a look at things, and it influences the work big time.
That's the nature of the atmosphere that we were working under.
For me, it was like working on a rock and roll record.
Yeah,
it reminded me of like my music sessions that I used to do. It felt like that. It felt like we were a band.
Yeah. I think that's right. And a band is another word for family, really.
To me, it's like it's all music, basically.
Ideally.
We're mixing sound for film, but to me, it's music.
The pictures.
It's music to the ears.
The dialogue. All of it.
Yeah.
Me too.
And I feel like when working with Jim, it's like making music.
That's right.
I'm your host, Isabel Sadurni, and this is Frame by Frame, introducing you to the most influential and respected film professionals working in New York today, as a celebration of New York's ongoing contribution to the global film community. Frame by Frame is co-presented by the Motion Picture Editors Guild and Post New York Alliance because it's how you finish that counts. Our website is postnewyork.org, and we can be found on Twitter at @postny. The host for today's episode is Soundtrack. Coming together in the early 1980s filmmaking scene of New York, editor Jay Rabinowitz and sound editor Bob Hein first met on Jim Jarmusch's Mystery Train, which led to multiple collaborations over 25 years on such films as Broken Flowers, Dead Man, and Limits of Control. Re-recording mixer Tony Volante joined in mixing the feature film Coffee and Cigarettes, and has since also mixed PATERSON, with Bob Hein as sound editor. Jay and Bob started out by describing the filmmaking scene of 1980s New York and how that set the tone for future collaborations.
New York was like in this film dynamic, like roller coaster ride. It was really, really cool. And people like Jim Jarmusch and Warren Beatty was here, Dustin Hoffman, Woody Allen just hit it, Martin Scorsese, all these guys are here. And the place was, to get into film then, it was a small community. And if you were in it, you were in it all the way, and it was really exciting. I think we embraced it completely, and it stood above everything else we were doing in our lives. We were fully engaged.
I think that's right. I think that's right. It was immersive. I mean, this was the 80s, really, that we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
So there was the Reds and the Ishtar, these big things that, like, this small community that you're talking about, almost everyone was employed on these two films and on a few others.
Yeah.
So there was already sort of these kind of big films, even though they were the New York version of Hollywood films, of studio films. So already they were a bit more independent. And Warren Beatty and Dustin Hoffman and all those guys were here, and that was all sort of within the Sound One world. And at the same time, at that time, some of these indie guys were coming out of that. Jim, Spike Lee, the Coen brothers, were all starting to come out. And so for us, I think, people that worked a little bit behind the scenes, cutting picture, cutting sound, and all that stuff, we were thrilled by the fresh blood, and we were thrilled by these sort of bigger Hollywood films that were here and had this kind of New York juice. And it was a very exciting time to be a part of that.
It may have been a lot to do. Films then weren't as accessible as they are now. If you miss a film now, whammo, you can look at it on Netflix or wherever.
That's right.
But back then, when a film came out, the premiere happened, it was a big deal.
Yeah.
And lots of these films were cutting in New York for a year or two. And the energy that kept getting more and more ramped up until it actually opened, it was a big deal.
Yeah, there seemed to be more on the line.
Yeah.
It seemed like you were making something important and substantial. Because I was just coming out of school in like 84-ish. And it was like kind of the last moment where you could know more or less all of film history. You know,
Right.
was like 100 years old or a little bit less, and you could kind of know what happened, how it started, and how we got from there to where we were at that time. And you could know about the Europeans, and you could know about the Asian films, and you could know a lot about the vast majority of film history. And then there was this explosion. And this was this kind of transitional period. This was before digital filmmaking. There was no digital cameras. There was no digital editing or anything like that. So it was like the last stages of that analog world of filmmaking, which was super exciting to be a part of. And to have been a part of that informed how you became a player or a worker in the digital world, because you had this experience of cutting film, cutting sound on film and cutting picture on film. But that made it a very interesting time, combined, I think, with that dynamic of there being sort of the New York version of Hollywood films and this really exciting independent film movement that I think Jim sort of started on some level with Stranger Than Paradise. That was like, people looked at that film and said, oh my God, I could do that, you know? Or I remember Spike Lee used to say that because he was in school with Jim, and Jim made Stranger Than Paradise, and it was well received at Cannes, and it was well received at the world, and it made it clear to someone like Spike that if Jim could do it, this guy was sitting next to me at school, then maybe I could do it. And so a lot of people started jumping in at that time, and it was a super exciting time. What you had been working for a while?
Yeah, I started in 82 or 83.
Okay, so not too much before. Yeah.
But the other part, the dynamic, was at Sound One, which was where most of these films were cut. In the evening, all the cutting rooms would merge up somewhere in the building, so you could hang out with Alan Pakula. And in would walk anyone that was involved. You could meet all the editors, like Barry Malkin, who cut for Coppola. And you could hang out with these people. And it was a small community.
Yeah, it was close-knit. And that also made it a really exciting time.
Which is very different than now.
Very.
Everyone's spread out and everyone's locked behind doors. And they don't mingle together.
But the biggest it's fascinating.
Why is that? Why do you think that is? Why is it the technology?
I don't know. I think people got scared of giving out too much info.
Protecting their
territories.
Yeah.
And the film from too much.
No, I
Back
think
then,
that's
I
part
don't
of
think
it.
we were
I think
too.
that's part of it. The technology did affect that, I think, because you could keep cutting right up until the last minute. You could keep cutting sound right up until the last minute. You could keep mixing right up until the minute. So it changed, but I think what you were initially talking about, Bob, was the camaraderie between many different films. And that was a huge shift to, sort of getting initially sort of like sequestered in the world of the particular film you were working on. Yeah. But what happened beyond that, which sucked, was even the picture and sound departments got separated. When we were doing Mystery Train, I was assistant editor on Mystery Train. You were sound editor, supervising sound editor, it was called at the time, which is now like sort of sound designer. Yeah. And we were in the thick of it together, day in and day out. Yeah. There wasn't a day that went by that we didn't work together.
Yeah.
And now, if I see the sound crew on a film that I've cut, it's kind of a miracle.
Yeah.
I'll see them at the mix.
Right.
And usually that's the first time I get to hang out with them. I will have interacted a little. We will have obviously had some spotting sessions and stuff. But the first time we're really sort of roof. That's right. And you're not within the world of the film together that much, and that's a really detrimental part. It's it's the way it is, but it's a
Maybe it's
detrimental
because they're
thing.
smaller places now, not as big as.
They're smaller and they're like satellite-y. They're like the sound guys are there and we're over here.
Yeah.
And
What was interesting is on Mystery Train, I would talk to Jay every couple hours, and he would clear things up for me. I'd be working on the film, and something would be amiss, or I didn't get it, or whatever. Jay knew everything, so I could access him anytime. Whereas nowadays, even the editors are sort of separated from their assistants now.
that's right. That's
So
right.
the assistant has no idea. I call the assistant because the editor's with the director, and the assistant doesn't have as much knowledge of the project. And that may be because of the digital realm.
Some of that's technology. I try to avoid that. I try to keep my people with me, and I know some editors do that, and sometimes we're more successful than others. Sometimes it's hard to do that, but I do try to keep people involved, not only in the process of cutting because I need I want the feedback from my crew of what I'm up to, but also in terms of the whole unit of making a film, the whole post-production team.
Yeah.
I think filmmakers want to get back to that. They want to.
They
Don't you feel
inevitably-
that when you
I
work
do.
with people? I feel like they want everybody to be sort of working together under the same roof, and
I think so too.
and having that camaraderie and creative.
Yeah, some of the younger ones haven't even experienced that. You know what I mean? The guys that are coming up but then there's those of us who had that for a minute. And it was a good thing. And it took a minute to recognize what was happening. I mean, schedules got compressed and everybody was harried and rushing about trying to make sure they got their jobs done.
Yeah, plus it's also beyond the film itself that you're working on. If I were to hang out with Jim and Jay in the cutting room and we shoot the breeze, you learn a lot about everybody's sensibilities.
That's right.
You understand the
Bigger picture.
picture stuff, and you start to meld like how you take a look at things, and it influences the work in big time.
In a positive way.
Yeah.
No, and I think with a filmmaker like Jim, that's half the battle, is sort of starting to get that sensibility, starting to have, and that comes from being together and working together.
Yeah. Tony wasn't there yet, but I include Tony because we have that kind of camaraderie with him also. We all hung out together. It was like, we grew up on the same neighborhood. We were like, it was like, it felt like that, like we were friends for life from young childhood even.
And
So
I
great.
think that's right. It sounds funny, but it's like that's the nature of the atmosphere that we were working under.
Yeah.
And Jim, we should say, Jim at that time also had this scheduling issue, which is that he wasn't necessarily a morning person.
Yeah.
So we would start mixing after the regular mix day was done. So the regular mix day would be 9 to 6. Then they would need like an hour to change over the room, and we would start mixing at 7. And we would mix until whenever, and again, that bred this kind of familiarity and hanging out. I would be falling asleep on the little couch and, but also hearing the movie, and you'd be half asleep. You'd be in dreamland and you'd be going, wait a minute, that's too loud, But it did, that was true on Mystery Train, and it was true on Dead Man. It's almost like, you know what it is? It's like now they talk about when they sequester a jury. Mm-hmm. We were sequestered. Yeah. We were sequestered in the world of Mystery Train or in the world of Dead Man. True. And we liked it. Yeah. No going home. No, don't talk to your family or your loved ones about what's going on. Just, you'll be in here. You will be in Memphis, or we'll be traveling around with nobody and William Blake, and we'll be trying to make sure we got the right birds and all that. But we're lost in that world. Yeah. And that can still happen a little bit in a mixed situation, but it's harder, when everybody's spread out and satellited and doing their digital work here and there.
For me, it was like working on a rock and roll record.
Yeah,
it
exactly.
reminded me of like my music sessions that I used to do.
Yeah.
Because they would always start late at night.
Yeah.
So I was like, here's a filmmaker that wants to work late at night. This is like rock and roll.
Yep.
And it felt like that. It felt like we were a band.
Yeah.
You know.
I think that's right. And a band is another word for family, really,
exactly.
which is what Bob was saying. So it is the same thing. You know, when we hooked up with Tony, we didn't know so much about Tony, and there was that same sensibility that you're talking about, like familiarity, like of being in a band or being amongst family and trying to make something special.
I was a new member. I felt like I was
that moment.
the new drummer that came in.
Yeah. Now, what you might not have known is that, like, we were, we would leave there after every session going like, holy shit, we lucked out. You know what I mean? Like, this is fucking great. And there's still sometimes some of that. Yeah. But man, it's been diluted. It's in between. And I think it's exciting what you're saying, Tony, about people, like this sense that people are trying to get back to that because.
I know I am.
Yeah. And I think it's something to aim for.
Yeah.
I have to work on that as well. It's, there was this digital revolution, and we couldn't always tell the side effects of what it was causing. And there were a lot of positive things. There's a lot of great things about sound editing and mixing and picture editing digitally that we wouldn't give up. But there's also something that was lost in terms of this family band connection.
Well, now you're like in front of your computer. Even for myself, I used to have a lot of people around me. But now I work alone generally, and I'm with my computer with everything I need. I can't even get help even if I wanted it because it's so proprietary, and it's like a creation. You can't have somebody jump in and muck around with your creation
if they haven't been if they haven't been in there with you creating it.
Yeah.
And if they were, then you could say, like, that crazy thing I was trying to do here, I'm going to put that aside and move on because I got other things I got to do. But maybe you can sort of try to find me the right thing for that. And by working together, you could come up with that. And that's something that we have lost a little bit that we need to bring back.
It reminded me on all of Jim's mixes. We'll be working and we'll stop for a minute to like discuss what we just saw, and that'll turn into could be an hour, could be two of just joking around. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that doesn't happen anymore.
No, and I think that was something that whether he was conscious of it or not, like maybe it just happened and he kind of instigated that and it happened, or maybe he was aware of it. I don't know. It almost doesn't matter. The fact that it gave you that experience with each other of enjoying that and enjoying that time together, and it is creative, and then digging back in.
Yeah,
that is a big part of working with Jim. Is those moments you're talking about. Yeah, that's when you really get close.
And somehow in that time period of whatever's going on, you wind your way back to the work, and you've discovered something by goofing around.
Something new and something creative.
It's really interesting, actually.
Yeah,
Jim's very very cool.
Night on Earth was these taxi rides that in a normal film you would see somebody go out and hail a cab and then you would see them arrive at their destination. But he made a movie about the part that was normally cut out of the movie, which was the ride itself. And that's what these guys are talking about, whether it's in the mix or the cutting room or anywhere, was these in-between moments where it's going to sound pretentious, but these in-between moments where people connect with each other. And it's that downtime, it's that kind of like joke time, familiarity, feeling like we're playing in a band together that makes those films special. And that I do think, really, I'm not sure if it's conscious on his part or not. I just think it's something that he facilitates. It's his personality. It's the way he goes through life. Yeah.
When we started, I just know that it didn't take us long to get into a groove, all of us.
Because I think people like me and you, if I could be so bold, like we're hungry for something like that and allowed ourselves to be consumed by something like that. Because it's funny what you're saying. It's very, very true. I had no other experience. Really, I had been in school and I had done Down by Law as an intern, as an apprentice, and so I had met this guy who had written and directed this film, and we were working on the film, and so I didn't know there was anything. That's why I was, I think, a little bit sort of naive and innocent, but like, because I was like, yeah, of course this is the way it worked.
No
this
reference,
is yeah, and so that that's just the way it was.
Yeah.
And then you really just kind of fell right into that, and so it was a continuation of that same kind of vibe. Like there were some crazy hours on that film too. I remember there was a we were on 54th. So Trans Audio. And I think you were there too.
I might have been.
I think you and your whole team were there too.
Yeah, you're right.
On the
I was
same
there.
hallway.
I was there.
And we were just, and this was the building that had, in the previous decade, housed Studio 54.
Right.
So there was a bit of history there. And it was 1 block away from Duart, the lab, where our film was processed. Yeah, there was film and processing and things like that. And it was also directly across the street from the corner pizza place, which obviously has had an enormous impact on my life. Luigi's.
Luigi's, yeah.
Which was also the name of the restaurant at the end of Down by Law, Luigi's Tin Top. But yeah, we would spend extraordinary amounts of time in there, late into the night, early into the next day, just like, because the world that we were creating, we recognized, like Bob's saying, as a world written and directed by somebody whose world we wanted to fall into.
Yeah.
It was just a real cool place to be.
I think also Jim Jarmusch wanted our collaboration.
Oh, this is a huge point. Go ahead. Sorry.
He just like, you guys, I love what you're doing. Help me get there. You know, there was no separation between us. You know, it was just creative we're all on the same level.
This was true on Down by Law and on everything we did with Jim. You know, everyone's opinion was equally valid. And so for him, it wasn't so much that he wrote and directed it and his word was going to be the be-all and end-all.
Right.
Not quite the opposite. He may have done that, and we were certainly happy that he had, because it gave us a world to go into. But once we were all ensconced in that world together, we all had an equal say in what was the right cut or what was the right sound. And it didn't matter if we were an intern or an apprentice or an editor or a sound editor or a mixer or anybody else. You know, I think there was this general assumption that we all had a sense of this world that we were creating. And so our opinion about how to hone in on it was as valid as anybody else's.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that's again a big difference from a lot of the other things that were going on. I think different filmmakers have different ways of utilizing or not their crews, you know, and Jim's was certainly evolved out of this desire to appreciate and absorb and respect everybody's opinion.
I have a funny anecdote about that. On Broken Flowers, there's a dream sequence. And these guys said, whip something together for it, and we'll come up and check it out. So I got into this whole, like, Salvador Dali state of mind. I was being very surrealistic, and I went crazy. I created this masterpiece of nonsense.
Never to have been heard.
Yeah. And Jim and Jay came up and I played it for them, and they were just like, this hadn't happened ever before for us, I don't think. But they were all kind of like, wow, what the heck is that? Jim said, this is about a woman who's very feminine. She's dreaming, and it's supposed to be very gentle and beautiful. And I love what you did, but it's not that at all. You remember that, Jay?
Yeah, and sometimes, look, let's be frank. Sometimes the man had to set a course correction.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes there was a navigational error.
It was an error,
and the course had to be corrected.
It spun out of orbit there.
Not to say we wouldn't do that. You know, we had to do that when that was required.
But you can make a gigantic mistake like that with Jim, and it was fine.
Not only fine, it was really it's really beneficial, because in everything that we've been saying about this sort of non-hierarchical approach, there was an author at the helm who would say, like, I don't think that's exactly the intention here. Let's get back on track. So we appreciated having. Look, he may not have thought we had a leader, but we had a leader. You know, and I think we all knew that. And you know, maybe there's.
And I think his vision was always so clear. And
especially
concise that it was easy to always get back on track.
That's right.
You could go off, Bob, like you're saying, on a whim and just try something crazy. And if it didn't work, whoosh, you could lock right back in. It wasn't like, oh man, I'm lost now. I don't know what to do.
No.
To me, it was just like the clarity in his work. You know, as a mixer, you use the images to inspire you to mix the sound, and his visual style is so precise and clean and focused that it for me it speaks easily to you to create.
I think a big part of it is Jim's outlook on life and the sense of humor he imbues into the characters.
That's good.
It's actually the way he is.
That's true.
So when you work with him, you understand the movie because
it's a part of him.
It's part of him. And I think all of us have a little bit of that in us. So when you see Mystery Train, it's hysterical, but you're not laughing out loud because it's deep, you know? And that's the visionary part, that it's intangible, and I don't think too many filmmakers are able to find that. There definitely are others, but that for us was really special when we started.
It was easy to know what Jim was.
And to not feel even remotely bad about having gone
Not
south
remotely.
instead of north. You know what I mean? Like, that's what we're here for. That's exactly what we're here for. And if you don't have the freedom, if you don't feel the freedom to do that, you're not going to do your best shit.
No, I remember him actually telling me when I was mixing with you, Bob, at one point, you know, I had tried reaching out a little bit, and he pulled me back in. And but he did that with also saying, but don't stop reaching out.
Right.
You know, I still want you to always keep reaching out.
Yeah, it's good that he's aware of that. It's good that he's aware of that.
You know, so I
which
thought
is
that
which
was
is
really,
which is a little not unheard of, but a little unusual.
Yeah.
Not the most you think.
You know, I think when I got to know Jim and Jay and when we got going, I understood that I had to create a universe solely that lived on its own. It wasn't any other universe. It was the universe of this movie. And when I worked, I'd get into that frame of mind, or, you know, meditation, if you want to call it that, to create those worlds. And I'd present it, you know. And I think the word trust is very important, because if you do this work and you know that you're going to go into a mixing studio with it and you have no reservations, no fear, no apprehension, actually you look forward to it. This is going to be a blast. We're going to have an amazing time. And just riding that, you know, wave of like enthusiasm is how we worked on these movies. So trust was very important, because you could dream up something and show up with it, and people would appreciate it. If you didn't end up with it, you'd end up with something that evolved out of it.
Something better even.
Yeah. The other thing about it is that his films are walking a very razor line. And when we mix them, I'm sure it's the same for Jay when he cuts them, everything has to be just right on the edge of that line. You can't go heavy one way or the other way. You have to remain right on that line. And
it's a focus.
That's
how I think of it.
It's
so focused.
It's a endurance test for all of us to keep it there. So when we do have a break, we kind of unwind a little bit.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, from trying to keep it there.
Yeah.
You know, when we hooked up with Tony on Coffee and Cigarettes, the feature, so these shorts had been being made, and you know, two of them had been finished. I want to say three of them. We had three in the can. We had the first one with Stephen Wright and Roberto Benigni. We had the Memphis version with Sankey and Joie that we did at the end of Mystery Train.
Yeah, I did.
And then we had with Iggy and Tom. And so then Jim decided, this was shortly after September 11th, 2001, that he wanted to make the rest. He had two more in the can that had never been cut. We were going to cut them during Ghost Dog. That's another story, but we didn't. And so we opened a cutting room and we cut those two, and he shot, I don't know, 6 more. I didn't know there was going to be math. There was a few. So, but there was something complicated. First of all, it was a very low budget operation. But when we got to sound, you know, things were tight, and there was some complication with Woody Allen.
Yeah, I think I was busy.
Yeah, we could have waited for you and mixed with Dom, or we could have cut with Chick sound and mixed with Tony. And we were like pulling our hair out. We didn't know Tony, and we were like, I don't know, what combination are we supposed to?
New drummer in the band.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that was the way we wound up going. Chick did the sound right on the feature,
yeah.
and then we went in with Tony to mix. And like I said before, we knew we had found a bandmate. We knew we had found a family member at that time, and we were super excited. But we didn't know that going in. So it was very, very exciting to get in there and to know that we were in good hands. And so I guess I was wondering if you could talk about a little bit about how things evolved beyond that with you and Jim. So because you did that with us,
yeah,
and we had a great time. And one of the great things about that too was that there was music. There was music in each of the 11 films,
right?
And so that was a way for us, because that's the way I connected with Jim originally too. On Down by Law was really over music and movies, but music at first.
Yeah,
and we had music in each of these 11 films,
which all had to be treated very uniquely because each it wasn't score per se.
No, not at all. There was no score, I don't think. It was all source.
All source. Yeah.
That brought that.
Yeah. And each
your ability to do that with us, I think, brought us together.
Yeah. The next time I actually worked on these garage tapes, the Tom Waits garage tapes.
Yes.
And there were all these little shorts with Tom Waits up at his farm that Jim had filmed, and they're really cool. Most of them were, like performance kind of pieces with Tom singing into a megaphone and playing drums.
But it was a little bit of insight into Tom's world.
Very much so. Yep. And then after that, we worked again together.
Mm-hmm.
I worked again with Jim, but first time working with you on PATERSON, which it was like I had known you since kindergarten or something. It felt like
exactly
like, even though that was our first time working together, it felt like we were old souls somehow reuniting.
Absolutely.
And it was a wonderful experience. It just felt natural.
And I think that the consciousness of making a Jim Jarmusch film, for us who are in it, we can instantly relate to the work together. I don't know how to explain it. You know what I mean? It didn't take us more than 10 seconds to get there.
To know what
we knew we were like both on the wavelength,
yeah,
and it was off after
we
that.
both knew the sensitivity that was needed, and we're on the same page. And
there's a waterfall in PATERSON. Tony made it magical. He spent hours and hours creating this magic with water.
Such
just
a great
turn on the
location.
waterfall. Turn it out. He spent
Such a great
hours. It
location.
was awesome.
Yeah.
Where was that? Where was that one mixed? What room was that one mixed?
We mixed it in Studio A at Harbor.
Oh, okay.
And you would think like, oh, here's a film that's all dialogue on riding around on buses for
Right.
the most part, and in front of a waterfall.
Yeah.
Oh, this will be great.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
But it's actually recorded very well, and
I have to say, I would be remiss if I didn't mention Drew Cunyon, who's recorded the sound for all of Jim's films, and he is
phenomenal.
I'm sorry, he is a genius. He is phenomenal. He just, you don't. It's like when you go and work on something else that you start to realize how you don't always get the care and the quality that you get from somebody like Drew, and
Drew is always up against God knows how many
exactly
obstacles.
all those guys.
But nothing,
definitely.
nothing phased him.
One of the lowest guys on the totem pole, really, because first, you have the actors, so you got to deal with them. You have the cameraman, who's probably gonna be a bit of a prima donna, if you don't mind my saying so. You're gonna have like the costume designer. You're gonna have like all these people, and the sound guy's gonna be like, wait a minute, this is Mike's money. You know what I mean? But he somehow manages. First of all,
I think Jim probably has a lot to do with that.
I think so too.
Jim is such a sound guy.
That's right.
That he's going to make sure that he's getting.
He had done some sound work of his own when he was coming up.
Yeah.
He was a sound recordist, I think, on the William Burroughs doc and some other things.
And what was interesting on PATERSON was Jim did the music as well, like performed the music.
Talk about that a little bit. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah,
How did
that was really I think unique to.
I went to the cutting room and they had temp score in there, and I'm watching it. I'm like, film stops, and I loved it. And he said, "Well, what do you think of the score?" And I said, "How come you're not doing the score? I don't get it." And well, I'm thinking about it.
Because what had happened was he had done a portion of it on Limits of Control is where he first started to do some original music. Because I think that was the one where he had brought these kind of drone guitar bands, Sun and Earth, and Boris. And so we used some pre-existing tracks of those of Boris, of Sun, and of Earth, and then sort of some Squirrel sort of filled in the rest. And then on Only Lovers Left Alive, it was sort of a Squirrel, Joseph von Wissem collaboration, and then on PATERSON, it was all Jim and all Squirrel.
Yeah.
That was the progression.
Yeah.
I asked Jay to talk about his process as a picture editor and working with Jim Jarmusch, and how a film like Dead Man came together.
One of the things about cutting for Jim is that he likes to keep things sort of separated. So you're not on location, as you are on many other films. So you're in New York, and he's wherever he may be, New Orleans, Memphis, Arizona, the Pacific Northwest, wherever you may be, they're doing their thing. And he's generally not too worried about the editing. He's worried about the shooting and collecting the raw material to make something good. And it's generally not until he gets back that he starts to focus on the editing. And this has been true throughout my experiences with him. And I like to find that way myself. I'm doing my own thing, and I'm trying to see what I can make happen with the film. But I do try to sort of send him a little bit just to reassure him that he's making a movie, and it's coming out, and it might even be good, and so that was what we were doing on Dead Man, and he had written with Crazy Horse in mind in terms of music, so I was sort of temping with Crazy Horse music, which was super fun. I had been a fan of Crazy Horse since my junior high school days, so that was all good. And I did send him a little taste now and then of stuff, and it would have something from Sleeps with Angels or something from Cortez the Killer, in there. And I think it allowed him, again, to just sort of know that whatever he was doing was hopefully going to be coming together in the long run. When he got back, we started cutting the film, and there were some complications. It had rained a little bit when they were shooting the last scene, and it wasn't clear if they might have to go back if there would be inconsistencies in continuity and complications, that they might have to go back and pick up some stuff for. It turns out in the end they didn't. Everything worked out well. But, that was the first film that we were fully digital for. I cut that film on a Lightworks editing system, even though they had shot on film. And so, but it did, one of the freedoms it gave me was to experiment, because I didn't have to chop up the work print and put it back together and chop it up again. I could kind of play and incorporate music and visual effects a little bit. It was early days of digital, but we were doing it. So by the time he got back, I had a lot of stuff going on. Some of it was along the lines of what he had intended, and some of it was not, I remember he had to talk me through. I had done the craziest, it's a little bit like what you were saying about the dream in Broken Flowers, because I had done the craziest combination of chaos for the opening scene, I think, on the train. And he got back and he was like, "That's all well and good and a mess. Here's what I had in mind." and I built that with him, and to this day, I mean, people write about that sequence that he designed and that he, illustrated for me how to construct. The kind of complication that I remember on that was we wanted Neil Young to do the music, and he had wanted Neil Young to do the music from the beginning, and we were having a little trouble making contact, and we had sent a VHS copy of something to Neil's manager, Elliot Roberts, but it wasn't getting to Neil. Elliot was doing his job. He was protecting Neil from lunatics like us. Yeah. And we were just about to say, damn, we're going to have to go to plan B, if there even is a plan B. What and it was at the last possible second that somehow Neil must have found this VHS and watched it and be like, "That's crazy, man." It had Cortez the Killer on it. It had, and he was like, "Okay, yeah, I see what's happening here." And then it was a whirlwind. And then Larry Johnson, the incredible audiovisual person under Neil's employ at the time, who had done Woodstock and all these incredible things, but was just an amazing human being. He was like, okay, once we heard that Neil wanted to do it, because he was hesitant. He was like, "I don't know how to score a movie." And Jim was like, "Neil, you can do it. You can totally do it. You need a theme for the bad guys. You need a theme for the good guys. And that's pretty much it. And then you just sort of, you'll figure it out as you go along." And so Larry built this. Jim and I went to San Francisco. Larry had built in a sound stage, basically built out Neil's concert gear, but within a circle of monitors that would play. And we hadn't locked the cut at that point. The cut was running about 2.5 hours. The finished film was 2 hours, but the cut was running about 2.5 hours. And he had built this circle of about 9 monitors, one real big one in front of Neil, and then they had built Neil's gear, Old Black, the guitar, and some other, his organ, and some other things that he had at his disposal, and a little sofa for me and Jim to sit on the sofa, and it was mind-blowing. It took them half a day to get this stuff set up, and this mobile recording truck was in the alley outside. And they got it all rigged up, and they were going to start the film. And Neil was just going to play along to the film. So we were like, "That's amazing. That's fantastic. That's great. Would be ideal if Neil could wear headphones, because otherwise, when you're playing back the movie for Neil to watch, we're going to hear all the dialogue and stuff on Neil's tracks, and that's going to be a problem for us later if we want to shift things around or play with things like that." And everybody was like, "Neil doesn't like cans. He does not want to wear headphones. He's not comfortable with headphones." And we were like, "Neil, we're going to hear the dialogue from the movie on the tracks. It's going to be a nightmare for us. We're not going to be able to use it." And he was like, no, don't worry about it. It'll be fine." And we were like, "Oh my God, here we go." After lunch, they start the movie. Neil plays along to the movie. It's fucking amazing. I mean, we're literally in awe. It's like we're watching our movie and listening to Neil Young play along. That was day one. Day two, we settle in. He does another take in the morning. I think we break for lunch. We come back. He does a third take. The final third of the movie, he stops. And I say, Jim, I think that's it. He's done, because he did that part so amazingly yesterday in the 2 takes that there's no way he's going to do it again. He crushed it. And he didn't play the rest of the movie. He watched the rest of the movie, and we sat there watching the movie. And then he sat down and he did, after lunch on the second day, he did the main title theme. And then what happened was, so we had like 2.5 takes of the whole movie, right, with him playing along with soundtrack and everything. And we made these VHSs. We made 2 sets, one for Jim and one for Neil. And they each took them home. And then a couple days later, we had gone home. We went home to New York, and we were trying to finish cutting the movie. And then a couple days later, we get a call like, okay, Neil's coming in New York to mix this. And you guys were in mixing Foley's with Dominic, like pre-mixing Foley's and stuff. And we were like, dude, we need Neil, we need Dominic, and we need the room. And Jim and Neil had watched those 3 takes at home and made notes. And then we went through and Dominic mixed the 3 takes together, and that was the score of the movie. And where the dialogue bled on, we had to line it up or not use it, those bits.
You know, we knew we were working on a really cool movie, and it was gelling and everything. But when the score came in, it was, oh my God, this is, you know, elevated a whole nother, you know.
At
orbit.
What point did you become aware of that? Was it in the mix that you started hearing that?
Yeah, it wasn't until the mix.
Because we really didn't. I don't think
we didn't have it
before.
Yeah. We were pre-mixing when you finished up there.
Yeah,
and then bango, we were mixing.
Yeah.
So for me, it was during the mix. I think a lot of that movie is from I don't smoke, but I can imagine if you sat in a courtyard in Spain and smoked and just watched and take it all in. That's what the film was, you know, hoping the audience would do. So that was my involvement, was to make that feel like beautiful. So luckily we did. It was like, again, it's a lot of sound editing and sound designing is treasure hunting. You know, you can't do anything unless you have the sound. It's just like a musician is so phenomenal because he can create those sounds. It's the same for us. We need those sounds. So we sent people to Spain, and they recorded phenomenal things that I was able to work with. You know, the landscapes of Spain. I mean, it's very unique. So I had all these recordings, and they didn't necessarily belong to what we see, but I felt something for one, and I'd try it here, and I liked it, and I'd embellish it with other things also. But the basic of it was the natural sound of the location. It's the same thing, for instance, with birds. Jim's very focused on, he knows wildlife extremely well. So if I put a bird in the desert that comes from northeast, it's wrong, and he knows it. So everything in a movie should be as authentic as you possibly can make it, because then it's true to itself. So it's a big challenge for sound editors to get what they need for any given movie. But somebody said that the reason you smoke cigarettes is because you get to stop and take in the world.
Yeah.
And other people don't do that.
Well, that's a little bit like the in-between moments we were talking about before, but then we all know smoking is bad for you.
Yeah.
Why would we do that?
I don't know.
The sound design and the sound effects are again like just a high point of sound editing and filmmaking and sound. the trust that was required because we were so preoccupied with finishing the cut, which we hadn't finished, and with recording the music, that Jim was just like, El Bobo's on it. And we'll be good.
Which brings us to El Bobo.
And we got there, and we were. And it was just tremendous. Yeah, do you remember the derivation of El Bobo?
I remember on Mystery Train.
Yeah.
There was a Spanish radio station.
Yes.
And Jim would do his, repertoire of voices that do that on...
Put a dackin in the sack. Queen Bee Barbecue.
Yeah.
Queen Bee
so
Barbecue.
Jim did his own versions and somehow got off on including me as this character.
Oh, yes, he would
El
do
Bobo.
the English Town Raceway, like the Raceway voice commercial.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Raceway. And that's right. But somehow El Bobo came out of that. And Reggie the dog. That was down by law. Frank Kern. There was a phrase in Italian that again, this is neither here nor there, but there was this phrase in Italian that Benini used to say that to us sounded like he was saying Reggie the dog. But so Reggie the dog. But somehow in Italian that must mean something. But that's what we started calling Frank was Reggie the dog. So it was Frank was Reggie the dog and you were El Bobo.
And you were Cool Jay.
I was Cool Jay. Originally I was I appreciate your mentioning that, and I will tell two quick stories about nicknames. Originally, I was the Lithuanian Terminator.
Oh yeah, right.
Yeah, because Jim had asked me about my ancestry, and I told him that my father's mother was born in Lithuania before she came to the Bronx, and I also had like these blue mirror sunglasses, which he thought looked like the Terminator, like Arnold Schwarzenegger. So he knew that my grandmother was from Lithuania, and I had these mirrored blue sunglasses. So he combined them, and he made the Lithuanian Terminator. And he also called me Lithoterm. He shortened that down to Lithoterm. And then at some point, he also started calling me Cool Jay, which I loved because it was like, oh my God, a guy who many, many people consider to be the coolest guy in the world is calling me Cool Jay. So I'll take that to the bank, And it wasn't until like many, let's say 25 years later, I said, Jim, it's funny to me that you decide to call me Cool Jay because I'm so not cool. And I'm such a nebbishy guy. And he was like, it took you 25 years to realize that? So
that's funny.
That's my Lithoterm Cool J story.
The last movie on PATERSON, for years we've been saying, why don't you use El Bobo as your credit? I was like, yeah, sure, let's do it. And it never happened.
Did they do it?
They finally did it on PATERSON.
Nice.
So people come up to me
El Bobo
out of nowhere. It's like, we saw this movie PATERSON. What was that weird name you have for yourself?
I didn't notice that at the end. I love PATERSON, but I didn't notice that at the end. I have to look for that. The only one who really used it in a credit for such a long time was Dominic.
Yeah,
Dominic used the Dominator from early on, and that was a stroke of genius.
Yeah.
And he was particularly fond of that.
I have a funny anecdote. When we did Limits of Control, there's, lots of scenes of characters walking in alleyways and upstairs and around corners, and so I was being very careful to make footsteps for these scenes where they didn't exist, so we'd have something to listen to focus on the character.
And many times in films, that does focus your attention.
Absolutely. So it's a standard thing you do, but you have to do it very carefully. So Jim came into the cutting room, just dropped in. He said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm making footsteps for this scene." And he watches it, and he says, "Come with me." And we get up and we start walking down the hall really fast together. Do you hear any goddamn footsteps? Do you hear one footstep? You don't hear a sound. You don't hear anything. There's no such thing as a footstep. why do you put it in the movie? You know, and then we had this huge debate about why we had to put it in the movie. He said, well, you do what you need to do because I don't hear anything.
Now I have to go back. Are they in the mix?
They are in the mix.
Yeah.
I hesitated.
Because-
I was going to stop doing it, but I didn't.
Good that you didn't.
Yeah.
Good on you. Because because that does focus your attention.
Yeah.
He's our man, you know,
Yeah.
and it just kind of focuses our attention on his solitary walkingness.
Right.
But sometimes it's hard to articulate that when a guy's going like, hey, you hear any fucking footsteps?
Yeah, exactly.
Go fuck yourself.
Exactly.
So, but sometimes you have to hold your own.
Yeah, you
and
have to hold
say
your
like,
own,
yeah,
yeah.
well, this is a movie. You know what I mean? It's a movie. So
Like, I think there's a subtlety to his films, in the writing, in
It's all
the
very subtle.
acting. There's a lot of time for subtlety, and subtlety is for sound, is the most challenging thing.
That's right.
So-
That's right. It's
great
very,
part of the
very,
films are
very easy
subtle,
to
right?
do these big, loud, filled up with sound, covering lots of mistakes and but very difficult to do these intimate, quiet,
So when you do
sensitive scenes.
the mailbox in Paterson, it squeaked a little different for every time you got to it. There was something amusing to us. I don't know if an audience would ever hear it, but there was some little thing that we did to each one of those that was a little different. And that's what we do in those movies. We find tiny little things to do, and it all adds up into what it becomes.
does it still feel in the era of Paterson and Only Lovers Left Alive that those kind of details are still a part of the process? Does it still? It does?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah,
Good.
definitely does.
Good.
Yeah.
Because it's so, I feel that, but it's hard to know if that still feels
Yeah.
that way to you guys as you're going through the process.
Yeah, I don't think Jim has changed,
Yeah.
and the energy,
Good.
the same kind of energy,
Yeah.
is still in the same mode. Yeah, we we had the similar kind of experience on Paterson that we did on Only Lovers, or
Yeah.
yeah.
Because Jim brings that, no matter who's going to be in the crew. Because
Yeah.
he's worked with it's been a small group, I think, that he works with, very loyal, which I think is a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
But I think the results are always the same. They're special.
Mm.
They're great, no matter which who's editing, who's sound mixing.
I think also we know we're going to have incredible amount of fun when we work.
Yeah.
So
Which is not always the case.
it's not always the case.
Right.
And you get up and you go to work and you're just like, I can't wait. We're going to have so much fun today. And, and we do. And he's the source of that,
Yeah.
for the most part, because he'll
Definitely.
stop things and start telling stories. His storytelling is, I don't know if anyone's ever recorded him telling stories.
Yeah,
Someone
no, it's really
should.
second to none. But it's
Yeah.
hard because that whole recording process then right away puts some kind of onus on it.
Right.
Yeah.
But when it's just
like like the locker room conversation.
Yeah,
It's
sitting
like,
around
it's
shooting
only
shit.
it's
You
only
get-
for our ears only.
you get
And
the,
he'll
you know,
mimic each person, blend them into the story. They become a character, and he does different voices, and it's spellbinding, really. So, it's a big part of the process for some reason. But it hasn't changed.
Does that happen even in the edit room?
Oh my God, it happens like exponentially so in the edit room. I mean, the the amount of time focused on actual editing is modest at best. The better part of the day is focused on storytelling and
Listening to music.
Hanging out.
What I noticed right off the bat with you and Jim working together was your music connection.
Definitely.
Like the way you guys think about music, listen to music.
Well, I think editing
it was
is
so
music,
much
really,
about
Tony.
so much about music.
Well, but that's why coming from music mixing yourself, I think editing and filmmaking to a degree. I mean, I don't remember who said it. Frankly, I'm not sure that it has been articulated, that has duly been given to one particular man. It might have been. But somebody said, some wise man once said, that all art aspires to the condition of music.
I like
And
that.
I think editing does, and I think mixing does, and,
Yeah.
and I think what we do does.
Yeah.
And so yes, I mean I think that we and it's not even so much as saying, although to some degree it is like, hey, did you hear this band, or did you know that band, and or did you
Right.
hear this track, and do you, I love this track, check it
I
out.
remember the whole time we were working together, you'd be, listen to this.
Yeah.
You know, you'd be playing some random thing. I'd be
Yeah.
like, wow, I never heard that before. And
Yeah.
just
No, a lot of it is that, but at the same time, like there's this underlying appreciation for the other person's ability to appreciate what is a great track,
yes,
and what is a great cut, and what is a great mix, what is a great flow to a piece of music.
to me, it's like it's all music basically.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
we're
ideally,
mixing sound for film, but to me, it's music.
the pictures,
It's music to the ears.
dialogue,
And, yeah, I mean,
all of it.
Yeah.
Me too.
And I feel
I
like when
agree.
working with Jim, it's like making music.
That's right. That's all we're trying
It's
to
all,
do.
yeah,
Trying to make a good solid track for people to listen to and get off on and appreciate.
yeah.
I agree
Yeah.
completely.
This session was co-produced by Isabel Sadurni and Ben Baker. In New York, I'm your host, Isabel Sadurni, and this is Frame by Frame.